Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Every now and then someone will send me a note with a question that's such a simple concept, and I'll say, wait, I haven't talked about that yet, have I? Interesting. Alan said, Steve, the other day you mentioned common law, just common law in general. And he goes, and for some odd reason that sparked in my mind common law marriage, the phrase common law marriage. He said, what is it? Is it still a thing? And he said, by the way, I've been married for 48 years, which is very uncommon. Congratulations, my friend, 48 years is impressive. I think back to where I was 48 years ago and I was still in elementary school. So you were getting married and you've been married ever since. Again, I congratulate you. Common law marriage, though, is a very interesting concept. And I say that because it's not that common anymore. However, I'll let you know that I did a bunch of research on this, and the best explanation I could find is on Find Law. Find Law is a good website that gives general overviews of states. And what you need to know if you're going to look up something like this is you need to know what it is in your state if you're actually this concerned about it. But interestingly, in the United States, common law marriage has been around for quite some time, well over 100 years, 150 years. And the interesting thing is that most states no longer have it. So most people are going to go, heard of it, but don't know anybody in a common law marriage, for the most part. And here's why. There is something like 7 or 8 states that still allow it, and there's the District of Columbia, which still allows it. And so here's the deal. If you have a common law marriage that's valid in one state, if you move to another state, technically, you're still married, but it's a common law marriage. But the question is, what state did you get married in? So we'll explain this. A common law marriage is one where the couple lives together for a period of time and holds themselves out to the friends, family, and community as being married, but without ever going through the formal ceremony or getting a marriage license or necessarily registering it anywhere. Okay, so in Michigan, if you want to get married, you got to go to the courthouse or the county clerk's office, pay a fee, you give it to them, and you have to come back a couple days later and get it, and then it's good for a certain period of time, and then you go get an officiant or an official who then officiates the ceremony in front of witnesses, and then they sign it and they file it with the courthouse or the clerk's office, and the clerk's office is in the courthouse in Oakland County. That's why I keep saying it. And there's an official record that you are married. And if you want to undo that marriage, you got a whole process to go through. So if you are common law married, there's going to be a whole process to go through also. But here's the deal. Some states will allow you, if you are allowed to get married, to skip the whole license nonsense and simply live together as man and wife. But that's not just living together. That means you also act as man and wife, husband and wife. So that means that when you meet people, you go, hey, that's my husband, this is my wife. It means you file your taxes married. If you want, you buy property jointly. And so this is the key, is that you hold yourselves out as being married, but didn't go through the formal ceremony or the marriage license. Hullabaloo. Here are the 3 common requirements for most states. And keep in mind that simply living together does not by itself create a common law marriage. Number 1, you do have to live together. Okay, so living together as a husband and wife is step 1. But that won't do it by itself. Step 2, you must have the capacity to be married. And in many states, there's an age that you must be to get married. It might be 18. Some states it's 16 with parental consent. But 18, generally speaking, think right around there. You must be of sound mind and you must not be married to someone else. So if you're separated but married and you move in with somebody else and go, hey, we're common law married. No, you're not. Otherwise, you'd be a common law bigamist. So that doesn't happen. 3, you both must intend to be married. So in other words, you've discussed it. I think we should be married. Husband and wife. Boom, let's tell our friends we're married. Okay? And then 4, and this is where it really, gets tricky. You must both hold yourself out to friends and family as being a married couple. This is no bright line. There's no, things that you can just check off and say, here, we've done this. But here are some examples. For instance, one of you takes the other's last name. So in some states, you can go into the Secretary of State's office and go, hey, or DMV and go, I want my driver's license name changed because I got married. And it's a common law state. They'll say, oh, okay, let you change your last name. They might make you sign something to indicate that you did that. Do you refer to each other in public as husband, wife, or spouse? Do you say, this is my wife, this is my husband? Do you do that? Okay. And for instance, do you hold joint bank accounts, joint credit cards, buy property together, and so on? And again, you can do that in the common law marriage states. Now, here are the states that recognize common law marriage. It's not that many. Colorado, which I wore the shirt just for the occasion. Iowa, Kansas, Montana, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah, along with the District of Columbia. Meanwhile, Texas doesn't call it common law marriage, they call it an informal marriage. But like I said, in years gone by, more states allowed it. But they've started, making these things more uniform. But, those are the states. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 states plus the District of Columbia. And I've seen some confusion on this. Wikipedia did not list South Carolina, for instance. But then I went and looked at the sources that Wikipedia cited, and South Carolina is listed. So that's what happens when crowdsourcing goes wrong. But if you are in a state that allows common law marriage and you're interested in this, double check. But you still might want to go do the license thing just in case. But you want to save $10 and keep Big Brother and the government out of your marriage, do the common law thing. The following states formerly recognize common law marriages and will generally still recognize them if the couple satisfy the requirements before the marriages were banned. So if you were in Georgia, Idaho, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Ohio, or Pennsylvania, and you were living together as husband and wife before they abolished it, they'll still recognize it. So for instance, Pennsylvania did away with common law marriage in 2005. So it's possible if you were living together as husband and wife in 2004 in Pennsylvania, even Pennsylvania will recognize that as a common law marriage in Pennsylvania. Some of these other states go back much further. Ohio, for instance, 1991. So if you were living in Ohio as husband and wife in a common law marriage setting, even Ohio would recognize that. Now, here's the thing. If you got common law married in one of the states that recognizes it today, and you move to a state that does not recognize it, such as Michigan, okay, you are still married because the Constitution's got a section called the Full Faith and Credit Clause. And the Full Faith and Credit Clause says that each state will recognize things that other states recognize when they're brought over. For the best example is contracts, okay? So someone signs a contract in Ohio and they seek enforcement of it in Michigan, for instance, because the defendant moved to Michigan. Michigan will recognize the contract from Ohio and say, yeah, it's a contract. We'll enforce it here as long as there's a jurisdiction and all that stuff. So if somebody gets married in one state and they move to another state, they're married in that state. They don't scrutinize it and go, well, gee, I don't know, does that marriage meet our standards? No, it met their standards. So as long as it met their standards, that's a good marriage here. So the Full Faith and Credit Clause means that if you have a common law marriage in one of these states, you can then take it and it transports. Now, there are concerns about common law marriage. So it says, for instance, if you don't have capacity to marry at the point you start living with someone, you can still end up in a common law marriage. So suppose you started living together when you're beneath the age at which you could legally get married in that state, but you stayed living together. Well, somewhere along the line, you hit the point where you're legally allowed to get married if you want to. And if you do all the rest of the stuff, you could become common law married. You should also be aware that, for instance, if you or your partner get a divorce with a former spouse while you're living together in a common law marriage state, you'd have to know about that. Or you move into somebody who's married and their spouse dies while you're living with them. Obviously, very, very unusual circumstances, but I assure you, it's happened. In both cases, you lacked the capacity to marry at the time you moved in, but you gained the capacity back through the divorce or the death of the spouse. Now, once established, a common law marriage is just as valid and binding as a formalized or official marriage. It lasts until a court grants a divorce or one of the partners dies. If your partner or presumptive spouse dies before you've legally established your common law marriage, you have to prove your marriage to be able to inherit or receive insurance benefits, Social Security survivors benefits, or pension benefits. And that's what often happens in these cases, where there's a couple that are not officially married, but they've been together for 20 years, and then one of them dies without leaving a will. And in a state that recognizes common law marriage, if those two were officially married, then chances are the spouse inherits a lot, if not everything, of the estate. On the other hand, if they're not married, all bets are off. If the spouse who died had kids, trust me, they're going to show up and go, that's not his wife. That's not my mom, So how to tell if common law marriage exists, there's a few more things that we can go through here. Generally speaking, the strongest evidence would be a written agreement. But most people who don't want to do the whole licensing thing, they also don't want to do a written agreement. Here are some factors that a court would look at if you were to litigate this. Did you live together? Did one of you use the other person's last name? Did you sign any contracts jointly to buy a house or a car? Did you file joint tax returns? Did you file joint bank accounts? Did you refer to each other as this is my wife, this is my husband? We're married. Did you say that to people? Did you share household duties and expenses? And did you have and raise children together? And if you hadn't raised children together, did you act like you were all family and the two of you were married? So if you are curious about these things, you think you might be in a common law marriage but aren't sure, or you'd like to get into one, I would still urge you to contact a local attorney in your state. In my state, Michigan does not recognize common law marriages here unless they've come in from another state. So, if you're in a state that has these and you're curious about it, look it up, do some research, possibly talk to an attorney if it could matter. But it's an interesting question because I think there was a time when many more states recognized them and they were much more common. And nowadays, not so much. But it's a great question. And I'm glad that Alan contacted me. And again, I have to congratulate Alan. Married for 48 years, which he said, jokingly, of course, is an uncommon thing and certainly not a common law marriage. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Those I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Why is it when you transport something by car, it's called a shipment, but when you transport something by ship, it's cargo?